Are we ready to start, Jennifer?
It is like as soon as Karen gives me the go ahead.
Karen, is there a go ahead?
Yeah. We should give it about 10 more seconds to let the attendees load in, and then that'd be good.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I would like to welcome everyone tonight to the Encinitas Redistricting Workshop. Thank you so much for all of our panelists here today and all of our folks at home joining us for this meeting. So first, I would like to go ahead and just really quickly do some introductions. First, I am Jennifer Campbell. I'm the Assistant City Manager with the City of Encinitas. Tonight, I'm joined by Christopher Scannell. He's the Special Counselor with Nielsen Merksimer, and he'll be doing a presentation on redistricting. We have with us Shannon Kelly from the National Demographics Corporation, and she's the team lead, and they're our demographers. Another gentleman that may be joining us this evening is Doug Johnson, and he is the demographer with National Demographics Corporation. We also have with us Jay Schwarm, our Administrative Services Director, and we have our interpreter, Anna Nava-Colleen, with us as well tonight. So I wanted to let you know, as far as our agenda goes, we will have our presentation by our special counsel, Christopher Scannell. We will have our demographer presentation by Shannon Kelly. After both of the presentations, we will go ahead and allow speakers. I do understand we have 2 speakers tonight. If there is anyone currently registered for the meeting that does want to speak, you can put that in the chat feature and we can call you up to go ahead and speak. We will then do questions and answers, and we can take questions from the speakers, or you can also use the chat feature to type in your questions so that our panelists can go ahead and answer. After that, Jay Schwarm will be doing a closing, and she will go ahead and basically let you know of any future meetings and next steps. Tonight with our redistricting process, we do want to go over a few things. Also, we do want to let you know that if you do need Spanish interpretation, Ana Nava-Colleen is here. If you do need that, you can call phone number 425-436-6334. And again, I think hopefully maybe we can put that in the chat feature for folks. Again, for Spanish interpretation, 425-436-6334 with an access code of 1651745. Again, the access code is 1651745. And once you call the number and you have the access code, you will be asked to mute your phone so that Anna will be able to do the Spanish interpretation, and we appreciate those of you participating. Tonight, what we're going to go over is the workshop will cover the redistricting process. We will cover criteria for redistricting, communities of interest, and timeline. So again, we want to thank our panelists here tonight and our interpreter for helping the community, and thank you all for listening, participating. We hope to answer any questions you have and give you a better understanding of the redistricting process here in Encinitas. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Chris Scannell.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for joining us this evening, all of you who are taking the time. I think, you know, as Jennifer said, we have a couple of presentations, mine and Shannon's, and the way they sort of break down is I'm going to talk at sort of a high level about the process and the rules for redistricting. And then Shannon's going to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts, and particularly the public participation and how you can be involved. And of course, we're both available to answer questions, you know, throughout the process. I think to start, I'm going to bring up my presentation here. All right. So 2021, you know, redistricting. We, Shannon's company and I worked on the original adoption of council districts back in 2016 in relation to threatened litigation back at the time. And, that was only a few years ago. The current districts have only been in place for a couple of election cycles. And so I thought I'd start off by the obvious question that I'm getting in a lot of places is, it's only been a few election cycles. Why are we doing this already again? We went through the whole process. There were a number of hearings already in 2016. Why are we, replacing brand new council districts? There's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is the legislature told us to. There's a provision in the elections code that specifically says that every city council that uses election-based or election districts has to reevaluate those districts in the year following the census, which is 2021. The longer answer, maybe a little bit less glib, is the legislature has adopted that rule because it's responding to Supreme Court case law going back to the 1960s that says that you have to adopt and reevaluate districts periodically, which it interprets to mean at least every 10 years. And so the legislature has adopted that rule and tied it to the release of the census, because the whole purpose of this rule is to ensure that the districts remain population balanced over time, that the population is roughly equal amongst the various districts. And if you go back and you may recall, if you were paying attention in 2016, even though we were drawing lines only 5 years ago, we were relying on the 2010 census at the time for evaluating the legality of those districts. And so in that respect, they really are 10 years old because the population equality considerations were based on 5-year-old data at the time. And so before I dig into how we're going to go about redrawing the lines, I thought I'd start with just a bit of the timeline. We're going to be on a particularly rushed timeline this time around compared to a normal post-census year. For, like everything else, COVID has wreaked havoc with the ability to follow this up. Normally, we would get census data in March of this year. That's the timeline prescribed by federal law. But due to COVID, it's kicked it back so that it is, so that we're 4 or 5 months late, essentially, in getting the data. So basically what's going to happen is the Census Bureau just released its first batch of data yesterday, a few days ago. And what happens next is the state of California, under some recent changes to the law, has said that now a group at UC Berkeley, known as the statewide database, has to take those census data and adjust them to take out people who are in state prisons and federal prisons and remove them from the population. And if they can, reassign those prisoners back to their last known place of residence. And so that is anticipated to take another 4 to 5 weeks. And so we're really looking at having the data that we need to do this process, the final data, by sometime late September or early October. And then state law also says that to allow people to have a little bit of time to digest the data once they're finally available, the city can't publish any new maps of its own prior to 3 weeks after those adjusted census data are released. If members of the public want to make proposals, that's fine during that window, but the city and its consultants can't draw any maps during that time. And so we're looking at, having initial maps probably sometime mid-October into early November, which, as I said, is a bit of a rush because the deadline, unfortunately, for us to finish all of this hasn't changed. Basically, it's about 7 months prior to the next election. And the actual date in this scenario, April 17th, 2022. And if we miss that deadline, then it flips over to the local superior court in San Diego County. As a practical matter, we always build in actually a little bit of extra time at the end also because, just in case something goes sideways and we need a little extra time, or B, to give the registrar's office some time to actually take the lines that are adopted and implement them. Because they're going to be getting these new lines for all sorts of cities and school districts and everybody else throughout the county, and they have to take them and they have to reassign all the voters and make sure they're all in the right place. And so they have a little bit of a crunch on their end as well. So we try to build in some cushion there also. Another piece of the process, just to be aware of, is that unlike past years, state law now requires, and in fact Encinitas did this in 2016, that the city have a redistricting website that has all of the information relating to timeline, relating to proposed maps, relating to the demographics of the proposed maps, all the comments that are received, recordings of all of the hearings and workshops, agendas, etc., all in one-stop shopping. And so it's available right here at www.encinitasca.gov/redistricting. And so you can go there and get all the information you would need about this process throughout, and it'll be updated on an ongoing basis. So in terms of the timing, we talked about how quick it's going to be. Briefly here, we summarized the steps we're going to be taking. As I said, the demographics came out a few days ago. They were a little early. We were thinking they would be August 16th today. They came out, fortunately, a couple days ahead of that. But what we're anticipating is that the first hearing on this process will be at the September 22nd, 2021 meeting. And that's probably going to be too early to have actual maps on the table at the time. But what we're really looking for from members of the public and from the council are feedback on the current district lines, what people like and what they don't like, and feedback also on the communities of interest in the city that should be taken into account in this process. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means and what that entails and how you can go about providing that sort of feedback. But that first hearing, as I said, will be on September 22nd. And then that's when we kind of kick off the line drawing process. We're still estimating that the state adjusted data will be out sometime around October 1st. Shortly thereafter, we're going to be having another hearing, meeting workshop similar to this one, providing information about the online mapping tools that Shannon's going to talk about and ways to continue to participate, and also to continue to get some feedback on the communities of interest. And then November 17th is when we'll start seeing district lines. The demographers, national demographics at that point will provide an updated demographic analysis of the current districts with the final adjusted census data. And the council will conduct an additional public hearing regarding those communities of interest and get feedback at that point. And then they're going to instruct the demographer to go forth and produce maps. And what we're anticipating then is that process will continue through December, through the holidays. And then the council will have a presentation in January where national demographics will come back and present the maps, the draft maps that it would propose based on the feedback that it's received from members of the public and from the council. That first meeting the idea is for it to be proposals and suggestions, not anything set in stone. The way the first meeting typically works is, national demographics will bring in three possible map options and anything that the public might have submitted as well. And that's a chance for people to comment on them and say, I like map A, I hate map B, but C could work, but maybe could need some changes, etc. And get feedback on the actual concrete proposals at that point. And then we would anticipate one final hearing in March. The national demographics will bring back adjusted maps at that point. Also, there may be some additional maps from the public. And then March 9th at the city council meeting that night would be the final hearing on draft maps, with the anticipation that the council would then be looking to adopt one of those maps at that meeting as an ordinance. And then, we have one more, or the last council meeting that these can be considered if we need it would be in April. And the deadline, as I said, is April 17th. And then we have a typo here. The first election at which it would be used would be in November. So that's process and timing. But the question also that I want to address a little bit is, how do we do this? What do we take into consideration when we're drawing the lines? What are the rules of the road in terms of, where you put the lines on the map? And the way this works is there are some very broad federal criteria that govern the process. We talked a little bit about the equal population requirements. The Supreme Court has said that districts need to be substantially equal in population, which basically means that each of the districts, roughly speaking, needs to be about plus or minus 5% of the ideal district. The ideal district being, one fourth of the population, total population of the city, because 4 districts. And then next most important consideration is compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. That really isn't a huge factor in Encinitas just because of the demographics. Yeah, that act is really only going to require specific district configurations in cases where you can draw a majority minority district, meaning at least 50% of that district is this particular minority group based on the citizen voting age population. And based on our experience 5 years ago, that's very, very unlikely in this case. So in terms of federal law, the most important is going to be that equal population. And then within that boundary, within that constraint, we're really going to be focused more on state law. Because state law is really what sets the ground rules, within that equal population limit. And what historically we've had is a lot of discretion for city councils. A lot. Anything that kind of made sense, city councils could take into account and could prioritize. In 2019, though, the legislature adopted a whole new set of rules called the Fair Maps Act. And it specifies a number of criteria that have to be taken into account and have to be taken into account in a specific order. And so the most important in that ranked criteria is geographic contiguity, which means that the districts shouldn't hop and skip and jump over territory. They should be connected so that you can get from one part to the other without leaving the district. Not usually a particularly difficult thing to do. I don't anticipate that being a particular issue in this process. But then immediately below that is the one that may be the most important in this process. And that's where we look for the most feedback from the public. And that is a requirement that cities try to minimize the division of neighborhoods and communities of interest to the extent practicable. And we'll talk a little bit, as I said, about what communities of interest are. I want to emphasize here, though, the extent practicable point. Because it's not always possible to avoid dividing communities of interest, even if you know they're there, and still comply with equal population or the other criteria. And sometimes it's just necessary, some community of interest somewhere has to be split so that others can be unified. And it's still a bit of a balancing act, and it's a judgment call. So it's not a perfect absolute requirement, but to the extent we can, the legislature has instructed that we minimize those divisions. The next most important in the order, according to the new rules, is that the districts follow easily identifiable boundaries. And that means, major roads or railroad tracks or, school district boundaries, perhaps, or any number of sort of natural or man-made boundaries that people look at and kind of understand as an obvious boundary for their district. So they know what the boundaries of their district are and who they're voting with. And then last on the list is compactness of the population. Not instead of meandering all over the city to pick up little pockets here and there, that you not bypass population nearby to go get further population. And so those are the statutory criteria that the legislature has laid down. Within those criteria, if you've complied with all of them, then you could potentially take into account some other traditional criteria. For example, minimizing the number of voters who get switched from one district to another. Or even one election year to another, because sometimes it's an inevitable fact of redistricting that sometimes voters will get switched so that, some voters may vote 2 elections in a row, or another may end up having to skip an election just because of the way the district lines land. And the courts have recognized that that's unavoidable. There's just no way around that. It's legal, but it's legitimate to the extent possible for a city to try and minimize that and minimize the disruption that goes with it, assuming that they comply with those statutory criteria in the blue box there. And so, as I say, I keep promising we're going to talk about communities of interest, and this is kind of the big piece of it. A community of interest, under the definition set out in the Fair Maps Act, is a population that shares common social or economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. So what does that mean? It can mean a whole lot of things. It can be very broad. It can include, lifestyle considerations, for example, community character, economic considerations. Maybe there's, people base their political considerations on working for a single employer, for example, or an industry. Demographics, renters versus owners, or education rates, or language, spoken at home, or any number of other considerations. Geography, maybe you don't want to go over a mountain range because the people, on one side or another, have more common interests. It really, ultimately, though, could be just about anything. It's a sort of city-specific issue. It's based on what people think of as their community. The example I sometimes use is 10 years ago in the city of Phoenix, had folks who all owned some historic brick homes downtown, right? And they came in and said, look, how you, city council, address the historic nature of these homes and what can be done under the zoning code, et cetera. That's a common political interest that we all share. We think we should all be kept together in a single district. That's our community of interest, and that's what's important to us. And the city council did keep them all in a single district in that scenario. That probably isn't going to be a consideration in Encinitas necessarily, but it gives you an idea of the breadth of what a community of interest could potentially be, in terms of the political interest that you may align yourself with, and how the city council and the city address them and deal with them in the regulatory process. And so, that's really what we're going to be looking for feedback on from you this evening and throughout the process, because ultimately, as I said, it's a city by city analysis, which means you're going to know who your communities are better than we are. The city council will obviously have some sense of it. They know the community, but we're, as your council, National Demographics as your demographer, we're relying on you to provide us feedback. And I know, when we did this 5 years ago, obviously Encinitas has the history of the 5 communities, Old Encinitas, New Encinitas, all 5. And we took those into account to the extent we could back during that process. Again, and that's kind of why I mentioned it. It's not perfect, because we have 4 districts and 5 communities. So, and they're all different populations. So there was no way to just sort of give each one a district. But we did try to minimize those divisions as much as we reasonably could, while still complying with the equal population requirements and the other rules. But we're still, as I said, going to be looking for feedback from you. Maybe those communities are still the ones that are important. Maybe there are other considerations we should be focusing on as well. We're going to want your input. And so, the way we do that, partly we do it a little bit off of demographics, and, maybe official planning documents, et cetera. But ultimately, we're looking for community testimony, either written or verbal, in meetings and workshops like this one. And so I know Shannon's going to talk a bit more about, as I said, the nuts and bolts of how we go about getting that feedback from you. So I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Maybe I'll stop briefly and open up to questions if there are any, and then we can turn it over and Shannon can pick up and go from there.
Hey, Chris, I think we're going to do the question and answer at the end. If it's okay, we can have Shannon do the presentation.
That sounds fine.
I'm happy to. So let me just share my screen then. I'm going to stop Chris's screen sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you see the presentation?
No.
Okay, let's go back to the screen sharing. Oh, here we go. Let me put it, we should see it now. You guys see the presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm Shannon Kelly, and I'm part of our team from National Demographics. And I'm just gonna try and pick up a little bit where Chris left off. And as Chris said, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of how we're gonna actually put this into action as far as the redistricting process. So I will sort of skip over this because this should look very familiar to what Chris shared with you, but this is where I'll jump off from Chris. Basically, as Chris shared with us, there's a number of criteria, both the federal and state laws that we need to follow, and also some general best practices in redistricting. And those will be our guiding principles throughout this entire process. Here is the map that we have now. It's a tad bit of a blurry version of it, but what we can see here is we do, as Chris said, have 4 districts today in Encinitas, trying a little bit to go along the lines of the 5 original communities that came together. And you can see that the map that's been in place for now about 5 years or so, less than 5 years, is meeting a lot of the criteria that are set out. It's a rather well-defined, compact map, easy to follow along some major boundaries. But this is a starting point to think about whether or not we want to keep it similar or move forward with changes and tweaks to better represent where the community is today. Now, this is an interesting slide, and I just have to start by saying what I'm showing you here are estimates. So basically, the way that redistricting works and the way that federal law kind of governs it is that every 10 years, based on the census data, each city has to relook at their districts and make sure that their population balanced. And the federal law defines this as you can't have any deviation between the districts greater than 10%. So it could be that it's possible that a city like Encinitas could find itself in a situation where the old map is actually still compliant with the population balance of the federal law. We were able to do some estimates early on. Like Chris said, the raw census data just came out a couple days ago. It's in a pretty messy format that needs to be analyzed, and it's not in the California specific way that we need it to meet California redistricting laws. But directionally, we can see that Encinitas's current map may be close to the guidelines for being population balanced. We're still going to want to look at meeting all the other criteria of state law, but it tells us that the current map might be a good starting point for moving forward. So as Chris talked about communities of interest, basically the way that we would start with this whole process from a nuts and bolts standpoint is that we start with neighborhoods and we build from there. So when this map was created sort of from scratch back in 2016, 2017, the easiest way to start was to figure out where neighborhoods were, to figure out where communities of interest, as Chris shared with us, that's groups that maybe weren't geographic, but groups that share common interests that want to be put together in a district. And you kind of build those as blocks into bigger districts. So as we go forward, we are again going to be asking the question to members of the public, what is your neighborhood? What are the geographic boundaries that you look at when you think about where your neighborhood is and how those neighborhoods might fit together in a district? And then, as Chris said, we're going to step broader than that and say, and by the way, what other communities of interest exist out there that would benefit from representation? And when I show you a little bit later on our tool, I'll give you an example of how that, one of our online tools, I'll give you an example of how that plays out. But as Chris gave us the list, a community of interest could be, like Chris said, the folks in downtown Phoenix that own historic brick homes. It could be renters. It could be homeowners on the coastline dealing with Airbnb issues. It could be bird lovers that want to preserve a lagoon. It really could be any broad sense of things in the city of Encinitas, and we're going to take some public testimony on that. So these are the kinds of questions that as we go forward, we're going to hope and encourage the public to come to the public hearings we hold and share this kind of information with us. And we're going to be asking these questions over and over again. Help us define your community. Help tell us what your community of interest would be, and help tell us what types of groups you want to see included in a single district to make sure that they're getting good, solid, fair representation. And we can't ask this enough because this is really a core part of the project that we're going through. Now, from a nuts and bolts standpoint, we have a couple of tools that the city of Encinitas has chosen to use that will help every member of the public who wants to be engaged get involved and get it, hands-on experience doing redistricting. The city of Encinitas is actually going to be using 3 different districting tools so that there's something for everyone, which is great. Every level of technical skill that people have, we have something for them. So here we list the three tools we're going to use. And the first one at the top, the paper mapping kit, is exactly what it sounds like. We basically will have kits that have the city of Encinitas, a map. It'll show, we have a couple of versions, but they've got basically census block or block level lines on them. And anyone will be able to access this from the city of Encinitas website, download a paper copy, color on it, circle it, write on it, to identify their community of interest, their neighborhood, that they think those things that are important to be kept together, or to even use it to literally hand draw districts. You don't have to have any technical skill for that. If you have a little bit of technical skill, something that is new this year is we've tied it to an Excel spreadsheet, and you'll see on the map, there are little blocks. And basically, if you color in a bunch of the blocks, then you literally, it's like paint to numbers. You can put the numbers in a column in the Excel spreadsheet, and it will calculate some of the populations and demographics for you. So somebody that doesn't want to do anything really online can do a simple paper mapping kit. And like I said, that will be on the city's website. The next thing that Encinitas is offering to the public is a very simple online tool called District R. I'm going to show it to you in a second. The link is already up on the website. And it is the most basic of an online tool that uses kind of a paintbrush and an eraser, where anybody can go in and highlight different areas within Encinitas to demonstrate where they think communities of interest are, demonstrate important neighborhoods, or draw their own district plan. And we'll look at that one in a second. And then Encinitas is really happy to also be offering to its public the tool that we're using as a demographer. So there's a tool called Caliper Maptitude. Caliper is the company, Maptitude is the tool. And that is a very powerful demographic tool that we use. So somebody who's good at computers and likes playing on programs online will be, when it's ready, able to access that also through the city website and literally draw maps in a much more detailed way, get all the backup demographics, calculate the populations, and submit their own maps that they'll be able to meet a lot of the criteria listed by Chris, and they'll know exactly what the demographics and populations of those maps are. So that is not ready yet. It'll be ready probably once we get more of the data out, since the census data just came out, but that will be on the website as well. So let me pause here for a minute. Let me see if I can share my screen and show you a quick glimpse of the District R tool, which trying to figure out how to do this. Sorry for the delay. I'm trying to screen share the web. let's try this. Okay, hold on one second. Sorry for the delay. Can you see District R up on the screen? Anybody?
It's a blank map.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, sorry for, I've not actually done a double screen share before. Yes, we're seeing a blank map. So let me just give you guys, this is why it's good to look at it. It just gives you an idea. So basically, if you go to the City of Encinitas website, there's a link on the redistricting page. You can click on it, and when you open District R, it's going to bring you up to a map. So what we're looking at in front of us is, voila, a map of the City of Encinitas. And what I want to take, again, just a minute or two to kind of whet your appetite is up in the corner here, you can see all you're going to need to know to operate this tool: a paintbrush and an eraser. And basically what this allows you to do is to go in and highlight different areas and communicate back to the demographer, hey, this is a community of interest, or this is maybe the districts that we want to show. So let me bring this to, and it's very simple. It's just, oops, hold on, I'm moving here. Okay, it's a very simple click format, but let me show you really quickly something that brings this to life for what Chris had been talking about. Is beyond highlighting the districts, we can look at a little information about the city before we highlight the community of interest or the districts. And that is on this second tab, the data layer tab. It allows us to look at populations within Encinitas and some basic demographics. So basically what I've done here is I've simply clicked on the population button, and it's allowed me to show you a little bit of a concentration level. So you can see here, the shaded regions, the darker you get, the more concentrated your population is. That's not that exciting, but it shows you where you've got more density. Now let's look at something a little bit more interesting, which is the actual demographics. So here, what we see is we can look at some voting age population, which is what we look at when we're making districts, and we can look at it by some different ethnic groups. For example, if you wanted to look at concentration of the Hispanic population, obviously, as Chris already mentioned, within Encinitas, probably less dense in some of the language and ethnic groups than in other municipalities. But this here would tell you the darker we are on the shading scale that I'm highlighting, you'll see the higher concentration of, in this case, the Hispanic population. We could do it for Asian population, again, not very concentrated, but you would be able to see certain areas that are darker gray, which have a little bit more of a concentration. Then, so let's turn that off and go to something that will actually give us more of a breakdown. And we've got here a couple other demographic categories. So we basically here, again, the darker we get on the purple, the more we have. So this, I just have it toggled to children at home. But let's look at, I was thinking when Chris was talking about communities of interest, let's look at the renter population. I'm going to go up here and just highlight renter. And you can see again on this scale, the darker purple it is, the higher concentrated it is. So let's say that you thought within Encinitas really wanted to have, there were some similarities in the renter population, and that might be a community of interest. So what you could use is use the tool to start kind of highlighting around the different areas that would be, the renters, and it would allow you to create a community of interest around that you could then highlight and submit to us. You could do it also by education level, Spanish spoken in the home. There's a whole variety of different pieces of data that are shared here that you could see on the Encinitas map. And then finally, let's see here. Sorry. Once the last tab I just want to share with you here, and then I'll go back, and this is really a tool that is kind of more interesting for you to play as you go, it's not highlight the unassigned units, is evaluation. So for example, once we decide that we're going to highlight a community of interest and maybe create a little map, you can go to the evaluation tab and it's going to let you see the breakdown of the populations. In this case, we haven't really drawn some districts, so our numbers are a little off whack, but you'll basically be able to see kind of a breakdown of what you've got in each of the districts that you might draw. Let's just do all population. There. Oops, I don't think we have Native Hawaiians. So basically we're doing a cross here of different populations. And let me bring this back to the presentation. Let's go back to. Oops. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. So that was just a quick overview. We're happy to help anyone with the tool. The easiest thing to do is just click on the website and give it a try. And with questions, you can let us know through the tool or through the the email address on there that'll get forwarded onto us from the city, and we can answer any questions. I just have one or two more pages to highlight. As Chris said, there's a whole process in place, but I wanted to just bring to life, there are 4 public hearings. They were on Chris's chart, but that we're really looking for participation from the public. And the first one of those will be September 22nd. But as you can see, we've got 4 Wednesdays between September and March where we'll be having public hearings, and we'd like to get as much public input as possible. And before those even happen, please feel free to submit any comments that you have. Go onto the website and try the District R tool. And then also not on the public hearing list, Chris mentioned, we will be having also another public workshop in October, and we really are going to focus on the tool then and can provide assistance to people if they want to be trying the tool for themselves. And with that, I think, Jace, I'll turn it over to you. And if we do get any comments, this were just kind of the topics we'd be interested in hearing about.
Okay, Shelley, and Karen, we were going to go to public speakers.
Yeah, so we currently have 4 speakers. Our first speaker is Julie Thunder. And just as a reminder to all of our speakers, you have 3 minutes. And whenever you're ready to go for speaker.
Shelley, and Karen, you would call out the speaker as we go along?
Yes, Julie Thunder is first.
Julie? Julie, are you there? Julie?
This is Kathy. I'm looking at the registration list for attendees. I don't see her in the attendees list.
All right, why don't we move to the next speaker, and if she comes back on, we can ask her to speak.
Okay, our next speaker is Glenn O'Grady.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I didn't really want to speak. I just.
Okay. You're okay not speaking, Glenn?
Right, I just wanted to watch. I had actually sent Jennifer a document a week or so ago. I hope she got it.
With regards to redistricting?
Yeah, the process and using GIS to do that, how the tools, and I'm a chair on a committee that produced the document. And so I sent a complimentary copy to the city. I sent it to Jennifer Campbell by email.
All right, we'll take a look at that. and then give you a call if we have questions. Next speaker, Shelley.
Okay, and our next speaker is Kevin Doyle.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Okay. So I was currently serving as planning commissioner, but 5 years ago, I was just an interested member of the public, and I was very involved in this process. And Encinitas, when we were founded, was basically 4 cities plus an unincorporated area in between us. And written throughout our general plan is the idea of keeping those communities of interest separate. Now, we did a pretty good job mapping or following as many of these boundaries as we could when we did the maps last time, but we kind of went a little overboard when we tried to keep all of our council members in their own district. So there was one council member who lived kind of off towards in old Encinitas, closer to El Camino Real, and that's how we ended up with that weird gerrymandered arm coming from the Cardiff district, which I forget the number, that loops out over towards El Camino Real and further out, the Green District. So what I'm hoping we can do in this one is kind of fix some of those issues we did last time. I think we did go overboard, and I think old Encinitas should move up towards El Camino Real, which was one of our original criteria, was that all 4 districts should touch El Camino Real, since it's such a critical artery through our town. And so there's some errors there. And I was playing with the new mapping tool. I know I'm anxious to get a hold of the tool the demographers are using, but I was hoping for an overlay that would show the 5 communities of Encinitas. I think that'll be a really great aid when people try and build maps. So I'm hoping that's going to be in the place. It sounds like all the things I was hoping for, you're going to be putting in place, because I'm hoping to be very involved in creating maps that the public will review, and I'll be speaking in front of council on this matter as well. So that's all I have to say. I'm just happy. It looks like we're on track, and I hope we can settle things up and fix some of the errors we did last time. I think we were a little rushed at the time, but that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Henderson.
John Anderson, you may proceed. John, are you there?
Jace, John typed a comment saying he's good just listening for now.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Maybe we recall Julie Thunder?
It doesn't look like she's on there, but do you want me to move to the Q&A? I can read the questions and we can go over
Does
some of
that
them.
conclude all the speakers that pre-registered?
Yes, it does.
Okay, that would be great if you would go to the Q&A.
Jace, this is Jennifer. I do want to let you know I did receive Glenn's email and sent it off to the appropriate people. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Shelley.
Okay, so the first question that was asked, it's actually 2 that were asked, is whether will the homes of the current council persons be taken into consideration when the lines are drawn? And the answer was yes, on a narrow basis, so long as the mandatory statutory criteria are met. What the courts have said is that it is legitimate to try to keep an incumbent in each district so everyone has representation in their district on an ongoing basis. If you end up with 2 or more current council members in one district, it means that another district will not have a representative at least until the 2022 election. To be clear though, This is different from purposely drawing lines with the goal of favoring the reelection of incumbents.
Now, Chris, would you explain what it means when you say, what this means, another district will not have a representative at least until 2002 election?
Yeah, absolutely. So the rule that exists in California is that the current council members, even though the lines are going to move, continue to serve out the rest of their term that they were elected to. So if one of the current council members lives in, just to pick a number as an example, lives in District 3, but they get moved to District 2 as part of this process, it doesn't change the fact that they continue to serve on the council through until their next election. And so if you have a scenario, it happens, have a scenario where you have multiple council members through the process of drawing the lines end up in the same district, right? And so they may have to run head to head against each other, at the next election, or, how that all plays out depends on what their election cycles are. But, as a practical matter, that means if you have 2 and 1, and you only have 4 total, there's a district somewhere that has no representative from it anymore. And you can say, well, someone was already elected from it, they're going to continue to serve. But, the idea behind this rule that the court's sort of authorizing this is, well, those people are going to be focused on their new district, or maybe, understandably would be, because that's who's going to be electing them next time. And so what they've said is, it's, to the extent you can, it's appropriate or legitimate to try and at least keep them each in their own separate district. And what I tried to clarify here, people say, oh, this is gerrymandering, but incumbent gerrymandering is something a little bit different. That's when you're drawing lines with the goal of trying to put the best voters in the district for that incumbent so that they can keep getting reelected. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just making sure that you don't have 2 incumbents head to head against each other. They may end up still in a district they don't like as a result of that, but it's a very limited sort of use of that information. And with the changes to the rules in the Fair Maps Act, it's even a little bit narrower, because now you can only take the incumbent's addresses into account if, in doing so, you're not violating any of those 4 mandatory criteria that we talked about. The contiguity, the communities of interest, the recognizable boundaries, and the compactness. So you really can only do this if you're not thereby violating those criteria also.
Okay, thank you. Shelley?
Jace, I noticed that Julie Thunder is on now, so if Julie still would like to talk, maybe we could allow her.
That would be great. Julie, you have the floor on speaking. Are you there?
Thank you. I'm going to pass. I had some technical problems earlier and wasn't able to prepare, but I'll enjoy the meeting while you guys continue on. Thank you.
Thank you. Shelley, the next question about English speaking or Spanish speaking.
Yeah, so we had a question about how neighbors will be able to participate if they do not speak English as a first language. And we did type in the chat the Spanish translation line for this meeting. And that is in the chat if you need that phone number with the access code. It's 425-436-6334. And the access code is 1651745. And we just ask that you mute yourself so that there's no interruption in the translation.
We have participating in the meeting, just so everyone knows, a translator. Her name is Anna Nava Conlon, and she is available with that phone number and the access code. You just dial that, get into the access code, mute your phone, and you will hear the Spanish translation. Now, if there is another language that is needed, my recommendation is to call the line advertised on the notice and request that assistance in that regard if it's other than Spanish. So you can call and make the request.
And then Jace, this is Kathy. I think the question is also like moving forward, how are we going to do outreach? Like how will the people that don't speak English, how are we going to reach out to them?
Okay. On our website, the city's website under redistricting, we have announcements, notices, agendas, material discussed in the meeting, all translated in Spanish. And obviously, if there is another language needed, notify us. And our website itself converts documents to different languages. So anyone needing assistance, please feel free to give us a call and we will work with you for access.
Jace, it's Shannon Kelly from NDC.
Uh-huh.
One thing I didn't show, but both the Caliper online tool and the District R online tool, there is a toggle that offers Spanish. They offer a couple of languages, but you can toggle it to Spanish. And when we do the paper kit, we do have a Spanish version that we can provide to the city, and then you could distribute it however for anybody that would like it. So those tools will.
They will have that access. Okay.
Yes, because it the online tools toggle to Spanish if you'd like. It's already included in the tool.
Yeah. And then also, as I said, our own website itself translates to different languages. If you're having any difficulty whatsoever, please feel free to give us a call. And we have our IT department and several here that can assist you. Okay, next, Shelley.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our next question. Okay, so our next question is, are the 4 districts based on equal numbers of residents, population, residents of voting age, or registered voters in each district? If registered voters, is the registered voter database used?
Yeah, I'll answer that. It's based on total number of people who live there, without regard to whether they are registered voters or not. And that goes back to several Supreme Court cases over the last few decades. So that's what we use for that. We do use citizen voting age population for analyzing Voting Rights Act compliance. Although, as we said, we don't think that's going to be a major issue here.
Okay, thank you. And our next question, could a map of the 5 established communities showing the total voting population counts for each be made available?
So I responded in the chat to that. That's something we can probably get into the Caliper Maptitude tool, easier than the District R tool. So that's something that we should be able to get when we have the Caliper tool.
Okay, thank you, Shannon.
Anything else?
I believe that might be it, because I think Shannon said she answered that question. There was a reply. Did you see the reply, Shannon, about based on that answer, could a map of the 5 established communities showing the total population count for each be made available?
Yes, we'd probably run that out of the Caliper tool. So as soon as we've got that available, that we could also then print maps or make something available, but it would probably come out of that tool. So we need to get that tool up and running first.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that concludes the Q&A for what I can see right now.
Okay, there's also one that whoops, just disappeared. There was a request for us to have a sheet of paper or something that indicates the number. It says have a slide with each number to call for non-English speaking. So we will do that. added to the presentation. Anything else?
That looks like it's it.
All right, and no more requests for speaking, Karen and Shelley? Any other requests made during this
Let me
discussion?
check right now just to make sure. I don't believe so.
All right, unless there are any more questions or comments by our consultants, this is Jay Schwarm, Administrative Director of City of Encinitas and working with Redistricting. I want to thank all our consultants, Chris, Anna, Shannon, and all the city staff and that made this possible. We will again prepare and advertise. Please keep a lookout for the advertisements of the next meeting, which is September, is it 22nd? So September 22nd will be the first public hearing for the city council. So we invite everyone to participate. This recording of this meeting and the documents will be posted on our website for everyone to see and listen to the results. So I want to thank everyone for their participation and have a great evening.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank
just
you.
as a side note for anyone who's still in the meeting, it will be recorded and posted on the website for viewing tomorrow.
It does look like there's one more question.
The question is, it's Julie Thunder. I understand you will be at the Leucadius Farmers Market. Can you expand on that? I don't know what that question is, whether that's personal or not. Okay, thank you. That was a personal question. Thank you, everyone.